Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to another edition of Slidin into my DMs, part of the D4 network. This is the part of the network where we have a talk show basically about D&D, and I talk with all of my DMs about Dungeons and Dragons rules, about Dungeons and Dragons news, and basically we just kind of discuss ways to make sure that everyone at our table is having as much fun as possible. So thanks for watching. Thanks for being here. As always, to my DMs, we have Corey, we've got Mr. Rogers, and we have Preston. And yeah, how you guys doing?
Doing good.
Oh, pretty good.
Tomorrow's Thursday.
Yeah, just prepping for tomorrow's game.
Tomorrow
Did you
is
know that a
Thursday.
brulette ranges across temperate lands, feeding on any animal and humanoids it comes across? The creatures dislike dwarf and elf flesh and really like halfling flesh.
I'm glad my character is a dwarf then, because it sounds like you're planning on putting him in there.
Maybe I picked a random monster. You don't know. You'll have to find out.
I like it.
So let's see. We've got Dallin has the nice map of an area behind him. Preston, I don't think I asked you about this drawing last time, did I? What's your background here?
This is we use it as the thumbnail. This is the Blue Boar Inn.
Oh,
it's actually it's technically, if you've ever read the Howard Pyle version of Robin Hood, that is what it was originally kind of modeled after. But I used it for elements in this part for the thumbnail for our Tales of Neria stuff. So
nice.
Yep.
I'm trying out a new background myself.
Yeah, it's
simple gray,
very neutral.
Does it match your water bottle?
The shirt kind of matches the water bottle today.
Ooh,
close.
pretty
A
close.
little bit.
I mean, if you're colorblind, yes.
I've decided for a variety of reasons to try out a new locale for the recording. So we'll see how it goes. Let me know if you have any strong feelings one way or the other in the comments.
Sound quality, visual quality.
Gray. No, it is the exact color that you have no strong feelings one way or the other.
Exactly. You know, the other setup is a little homier. It's got plant.
I demand that we do a live recording of this every week in a very nice restaurant with lots of delicious food, and
that would be great if we could have the restaurant to ourselves.
We just have to have the VIP room, the mafia room.
Dungeons and dining, anyone?
Copyright. That's our next show.
Yep.
It'd be a little loud otherwise, I think. All right. Well, let's jump in. So as always, I want to, as usual, I should say, I have a quick ruling that I want to ask you guys about, and then an actually related longer conversation. So we're going to set up the longer conversation with the quick ruling here today. And the quick ruling is going to be on verbal components of spells, and in particular, how loud do they have to be? So this actually came from a commenter in my video this week, my build this week, the wolf and the coyote. Check it out if you have not. And I can't remember the name of the commenter, and I should have written it down, and I apologize. I'll try and remember to stick it down here in the little floating text. But anyway, they pointed out to me something that, frankly, for whatever reason, I hadn't really thought about much before, which is that, okay, so I've mentioned this actually multiple times in past videos and past character builds, especially when I'm building a rogue that happens to get a cantrip. And I say, take the message cantrip, because it's fantastic to be able to like stealth ahead of your party, scout out, maybe find the enemies and be able to sort of like message back to them, hey, here's the situation. It's almost like you got a little headset on, right? Only you can do it telepathically. And that keeps you from sort of being able to not break stealth, not have to like go back to your party, talk to them, go back, get in position, Instead, you can just say, hey, in 5 seconds, run in, swords drawn and guns blazing. But what I don't think I really realized was that the message spell has a verbal component to it, which is so stupid. I mean, come on, Wizards of the Coast. Like, really?
Yeah,
like,
why would a spell about talking to people at a distance have a verbal component to it? That's absolutely ridiculous.
It is ridiculous.
That's
because the reason you use message is to be able to like telepathically communicate with other people, and like nobody else knows that you're talking. But if you're like, and they're like, why are you chanting magical words right now? No reason. No reason.
I don't think that it's to communicate with people and not have other people realize you're talking. That's what
yes, it is.
Detect thoughts or shared mind is, or that mind link stuff. The message is used for being able to communicate with somebody far away.
But the range on it's only like 100 feet or something. Yep. Like you could shout to them at that distance. It's so you can talk with them without other people knowing what you're saying. Okay, fine. That's another debate. The question at hand is, you know, how loud does a verbal component of a spell have to be? So for reference, this is all we're given in the player's handbook. Verbal components of the spell. Most spells require the chanting of mystic words. The words themselves aren't the source of the spell's power. Rather, the particular combination of sounds with specific pitch and resonance sets the threads of magic in motion. Thus, a character who is gagged or in an area of silence, such as one created by the silence spell, can't cast a spell with a verbal component. That's it. It doesn't say how loud it has to be. It doesn't say it has to be audible to other people or within 10 feet or whatever, right? So
it has to be loud enough that the spren around you can hear it.
So can I whisper the verbal component of a spell, specifically, obviously, so that I could hopefully remain undetected if the enemies that I'm spying on are whatever 30 feet away or 40 feet away.
I'd say rules, or are we into the rules portion?
Yeah, give it to me.
Rules is written. I feel like yes, you could whisper it. However, as a DM, I would probably have you do a stealth check just to see. And since you're whispering and you're being quiet, you could do it. Either, and let's say you're behind cover and you're 30 feet away, sure, you could do it with advantage, but I am going to have you still do something to check against their awareness to see if they're like, hey, did you hear that? Somebody's whispering in the, like whispering sweet nothings through the window, and then suddenly a fireball appears in the room, like that. I'd probably have that kind of thing happen. But yeah, rules is written. I don't see any reason why you couldn't whisper it, as long as your mouth actually functions.
Yeah, okay. I think they intentionally leave it kind of up to the DM here on purpose, and it's DM's choice. I would say, because it does say you have to have a vocal component, then yeah, you could whisper. At my table, though, message, I will always have it be, you don't need a vocal component.
No verbal component.
No, I just think I like the idea of like this like stealthy team, like Mission Impossible. You all have like your headset and everybody knows what's going on. I think if you're an adventuring crew, you're like well put together, hopefully. I mean, maybe not. But I just like that idea. Yeah. I like the idea of like this.
Or if not message, you got like SWAT team, like you're gonna do hand signals that they all understand.
Yeah, being able to just like break in somewhere and get some treasure or whatever. I don't know. I say on my table, you don't have to do that.
Corey, what do you think? Bad cop time. Here we go.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So first of all, I want to give an explanation for why I think that message has verbal components. Mm-hmm. And the reason for that is silence.
Okay.
The silence spell is a level 2 spell slot. Sorry.
I thought you said science. I was like,
science. No, science.
Where's he going with this?
The silence spell is a level 2 spell slot that prevents verbal casting while within the area, and prevents people from being able to call out to their party or call out to the enemy, and that is completely ruined by a cantrip otherwise if it doesn't have a verbal component. There are also feats in the game and features like the subtle spell.
Yep, sorcerer, subtle spell. Yep.
That allow you to cast without verbal components, without somatic components.
Right.
So having those feats in the game, just giving it to my players seems very cheaty. It seems like a little too much.
I don't know. Maybe not just for one spell. That is just always used for utility. Like
I've seen message used in some ways that I'm like, why is this even a cantrip before? Because it's one of those things where like they'll use it in such a way that I'm like, well, they don't have to be subtle anymore ever now, because they literally can just communicate silently with one another. Like if the wizard can stand there and be like, Mr. Guard, that's a really good point. Let me tell you exactly who we are. And during this time, they are messaging back and forth to each party member to get their story straight. That's not fun. That's
so
not
fun. It's way fun.
No, it's not.
It's not fun for who?
It's not fun for the DM, but it's fun for everyone else.
So what I would do is this. Yes, you can whisper to cast a spell, as long as you can get like the tone and the feeling, like it's the word and the way, right? Like you have to get that there. Hopefully there's some Bulgarian fans out there, but I would say that I would require a stealth check versus a perception check.
Okay.
I might give them advantage if they're able to like practice that sort of thing, but it just feels.
You could also come up against, like, let's say the enemy might have the, what is it called, the one where you can read lips, that feat where observant, I think is what it is.
Yeah.
So I mean,
and that there's so many things in the game that say like, oh yeah, you can now cast the spell without using verbal components, or you no longer have to use hand gestures, and nobody really thinks about that until they are relevant. Yeah. And then you're sitting there with your DM and they're like, hang on, you're sneaking around. Are there verbal components with that spell? And somebody goes, oh yeah. Well, sorry, like you aren't being quiet if you're casting a spell. Like even whispering while you're stealthing is a bad idea.
Sure.
Like unless you can throw your voice and you're doing like a ventriloquist thing, which that could be a 2-for-1, right? You distract 2 guards and say, okay, time to move at the same time.
One if you're playing He-Man. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, I was gonna say my only counter argument to this is, and it's not like, okay, just so rogues get screwed over every time they play because they never get to do their sneaky stuff. Or they never, like, especially assassins, they never get that first hit, right?
You're gonna segue into our longer conversation very nicely. Continue.
So I feel like I have to let them have it, because then they hardly ever get that moment. And so allowing them to set up and get in position and message back and be like, okay, don't come in, barbarian. Don't charge in here until I get my attack off. Like, I think I have to let that happen.
That's something that your party should discuss while traveling, being like, I'm the sneaky one. When you guys hear the shouts of alarm, that's when you come in. Okay. You don't just automatically taking a multi-class or taking the arcane trickster subclass, because who wants to do that? Right. It should not be a requirement for a rogue to be able to be sneaky. You should be able to do that, and your DM should allow you to do that without having to use the message spell as a stopgap between it. And it's very much there. I know there's one more point that I want to make. It's very much in the vein of what some people don't like about the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and that's the fact that everybody seems to have invisible headsets all the time and can communicate with each other wherever they are.
That's all you got to do.
All you have to do is just put your hand up to your ear, and suddenly you can hear everything and know exactly what's going on. And while yes, it makes it convenient to get characters into position for the big fight scene, it also means that there are no surprises for those characters. The rest of the party isn't suddenly like, oh, hey, there's combat, we got to rush in there and do it. And there are no surprise rounds for the party at that point.
My bad guys have free message too, man.
But there's always that, as a DM, there's always that ability for me to say, hey, I need you to make a stealth check to see if you do this. You're whispering it, you're trying to make these tones without being noticed. And if it's a really hyper, you're walking up on behind, what's that assassin from Clone Wars?
Asajj Ventress?
No, not Ventress. He's got the cowboy hat. They're probably going to be on the lookout and listening for things. And,
I was just about to say Cad Bane.
I was distracted.
So, but like being able to do that kind of stuff, I think that there's still opportunities for surprise for it. But to Corey's point, I never want to cheapen kind of other classes or feats.
And there's ways to surprise people without being subtle. You just drop down and say hello there. And then boom, surprise round.
General Kenobi.
Okay, so to summarize, because you guys keep like getting ahead of me now, like talking about surprise stuff. Verbal components required, but whispering okay, still probably going to require an additional stealth check in that case.
Except for Mr. Rogers' table. Apparently.
You will still do a stealth check just
apparently
because,
you just have...
but I just love message being like that.
Oh,
CIA.
I think it's a crazy fun spell, but at the same time, it's like, I'm not going to give you everything you want with a cantrip.
All right.
Mage Hand doesn't let you wield an extra weapon.
It should.
But what if it's a loaf of bread? Come on.
It can at my table, but it only does 1 point of damage.
All right. So, yes, let us segue then into the larger conversation that I wanted to have, which is very closely related here. And it is all about surprise. So, let me read some rules about surprise and about how we obtain it and what it means. And then I kind of want to talk about sort of, first off, let's define it very clearly and maybe make mention of some misconceptions that I think generally people have about surprise, perhaps coming from previous editions of D&D. And then also, once we've kind of established, what it is, how you get it, how it works in game, like tactically and technically, talk a little bit about sort of tips for, this kind of gets to some things that Mr. Rogers was talking about, like tips for generating it regularly, tips to DMs for how to determine who is surprised and when, tips for like working it out with your party if you want to play a character who is really interested in like being stealthy and trying to constantly get surprised, et cetera, et cetera. Let's start with the definition. Okay, so this is what we are told in the player's handbook as far as the order of combat and surprise. We're told this is how combat works step by step. First of all, 1, determine surprise is the first thing that we're supposed to do in every combat, right?
And by we, you mean DM.
The DM, yeah. The DM determines whether anyone involved in the combat encounter is surprised, and then establish positions, roll initiative, take turns, begin the next round, etc. Then as far as surprise goes, this is what we're given. The DM determines who might be surprised. If neither side tries to be stealthy, they automatically notice each other. Otherwise, the DM compares the dexterity stealth checks of anyone hiding with the passive wisdom, the perception score of each creature on the opposing side. Any character or monster that doesn't notice a threat is surprised at the start of the encounter. If you are surprised, you can't move or take an action on your first turn of the combat, and you can't take a reaction until that turn ends. A member of a group can be surprised even if the other members are not. Okay, so first of all, for clarity, is there such thing as a surprise round? I hear that term used a lot, both online, even amongst us. But I feel like it's almost a misnomer, and maybe it's a holdover from like previous editions. I don't know. But
calling me out here, I see. Yes, it is a holdover from 4th edition.
Okay,
it is absolutely.
I thought it might be, but so I'm going to take a drink. Take a drink, but not specifically calling you out necessarily, Corey, because I think we all talk about it in that way, right? Like, oh, it's the surprise round, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's not a surprise round then, I guess, right?
Technically, it's the first round of combat, and it's whoever is surprised.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean. Yeah, it's all in semantics.
Yeah, it is a little bit.
I mean, technically, it's a round for surprise. Like if someone's it's not necessarily for surprise, but those characters that are surprised, it's a surprise round for them.
Yeah. So, yeah. I mean, it is a little bit of semantics, but there's definitely like rules and things that would probably come into play that it's like, well, no, it's not that this is a surprise round. It's that this is round 1, and if you are surprised, okay, let's clarify what you can and cannot do.
Yeah.
If you are surprised, right? If you're not surprised, obviously you can act as normal. If you are surprised, right, we are told, where did it go? You can't take an action on your first turn of combat, and you can't take a reaction until that turns out. You can't move. So you can't move, you can't take an action. Okay, so are there any is there anything that a surprised creature can do on their turn, unless they unless they have a specific feature telling us otherwise, right?
Yeah.
But generally speaking,
Right.
you can't do anything. You basically skip your turn.
You skip that first turn. So it might as well be called a surprise round. The reason why they made it a little bit more muddled is as compared to other editions is weird to me, but I get it. I understand they don't want to make an extra step on top of combat.
Well,
but yeah,
and I think for example, like like barbarians, get an ability. Feral Instinct at 7th level, barbarians get this feature, right? If you are surprised at the beginning of combat and aren't incapacitated, you can act normally on your first turn, but only if you enter your rage before doing anything else on that turn. So, I mean, I guess you could say barbarians are never surprised as long as they rage.
You get scared and it makes you so mad that you can fight. one of those guys who gets scared and instead of jumping back, you punch the thing.
Yeah.
Yep. That's exactly what it is.
The kid that pops out of the trash can and knocks him out.
And I'm sure there are other little rulings, things that are like, well, we don't want to call it a surprise round because that would negatively impact whatever this feature is that this subclass gets.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and the fact that they treat it differently makes me wonder as well, because here it says that you determine that the DM determines who's surprised and who's not. So that indicates to me that in that, and this is contrary to the way I've handled it. I've done a group check, and if one or the other sees each other, then the cat's out of the bag. But it's according to that, it seems like if Colby stealthed in and I tripped on my shoelaces and fell flat on my face, they would see me and not be surprised by me, but they'd still be surprised by Colby. Or they could potentially still be surprised by Colby. So as a rogue, it's less punishing to have your teammates there versus you have that cleric that's like clink 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 and everybody knows exactly where you are.
I mean, obviously, your DM may, you guys as DMs may rule otherwise. To me, what that is more like saying is, look, like if somebody knows that combat is about to happen, they're not surprised.
Right.
You can still be hidden from them, but that's not the same thing, right?
Right. But I think it's also saying that like specific monsters may or may not notice you while other ones don't. Because they have different perceptions, right? Because if you have like trolls and then like the minions and then I don't know, some archers, maybe the archers see you because they're looking for you and maybe their perception's high, but everybody else doesn't. Or so they get to act and nobody else acts. Or
or anytime there's an ambush, you have your entire party roll a perception check, just like the rules state, and whoever makes their perception.
Oh wait, no, it's not a perception check.
Oh,
it's not passive. It's passive.
A passive perception check.
Yeah.
Anybody who meets that passive perception, they don't get to shout a warning. They just get to act on that surprise round where the rest of the enemies do. Right. Everybody else has to be surprised by it. Normally I do a roll me a perception check. And then, you notice this and you have enough time to give a warning because I think it's cooler to be like, everybody is surprised or everybody's not.
Yeah,
that's just how I played it too. So.
It simplifies it for sure.
I like that. I do because I feel like it sort of rewards you for having a passive perception, which frankly, otherwise I don't feel like you use a lot in game, right? And somebody with a higher wisdom score is much less likely to be surprised, regardless of like whether they get a lucky roll on the D20. You know what I mean?
Well, as a DM, it's nice too because then, like for instance, on one of my other games, I've got someone who's got a 24 passive perception. Like there's very few.
They
monsters
worked hard
in the
to
monster
get
that. They will hit that.
They took feats.
Playing it kind of the way that we're talking about, that would be interesting because then you can still have a little bit of that surprise versus the hey, we know everything's coming, we see everything coming, and there's no threat of.
And so so I'm a rogue and I'm sneaking in and like basically I'm stealthing. It's my stealth check against their passive perception. They don't notice me. I go to, but maybe one person does. I'm making my attack. He notices me. This guy that I'm attacking doesn't. Therefore, if I get any sort of benefit to having a surprise, I can apply that benefit. But regardless, this guy that I'm attacking right now does not get to do anything this turn. But that guy that saw me and that guy that saw me, they're going to be able to act as normal. So
and if they
roll
high
initiative.
Enough,
they could go before you.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. So if they're standing on the balisade, is that a word?
Palisade?
The ballasts. The buttresses.
Buttresses.
There we go. If they're standing on the buttresses,
perfect,
and they see you and they've got a bow, right? Yeah, they might see you before you even get your attack off, and fill you with a couple of arrows.
I have one question about this scenario.
Attack. Yeah.
As a rogue, is one parent, two parents like dead, or like is it just the mother? Is it the father?
Is that going to affect?
Yeah, absolutely.
If both parents are dead, then you always auto crit.
Yeah. So one thing that I would do is if we had a specific situation where you had a player that was about to be ambushed. I would allow another player to forego their action to warn that player and pull them out of surprise at that point, so that the other player can have an easier time like avoiding or moving away from the monster or reacting, being able to use a reaction in that case.
Okay.
Because but again, it would be something like, this is an action. You're using your action to make sure that your party member doesn't get eaten by that ooze that's lumbering down the hallway,
Okay. So let me ask this just as a final sort of rules lawyer question. It says that the DM determines who is surprised. And I've read something somewhere. I don't remember if it was in the player's handbook or not. I think it is. But it's like, it almost leaves it sort of intentionally vague, I think, to say, look, like, just because I succeed on my stealth check and you don't have a high enough passive perception doesn't necessarily by default mean that the creature is going to be surprised. The DM still has some sort of leniency or ability to say, no, they're not surprised. Like, for example, I'm in broad daylight, and I'm trying to sneak up on a guard who's got his back against the wall, and there's no way for me to get behind him, right? I'm in the bush 6 feet away. He doesn't see me. I succeeded on my stealth check. I go to attack him. Like, is he surprised as I'm coming out of the bush with my dagger trying to plunge it into his chest? Like, is he surprised? Maybe, maybe not. And that's going to be up to the DM, right, to determine if that counts as surprise. So
I also think that's up to that first round of combat. Like, can you move and attack?
Sure.
Because if he's within 30 feet of you and you move to him and attack him, like, yes, he's going to be surprised. However, if he's within, if he's outside of 30 feet and you have to dash to get to him, like suddenly you've used your action to get there, and he's had enough time. He's had that 6 seconds to be like, holy crap, there's somebody racing out of the bushes at me. I'm not surprised anymore. But you do get the advantage of being able to run up to him. Yeah, exactly. Running up over and over.
And I do think, I mean, you guys chime in here and let me know if you think I'm off base here, but I do think that there's room in there for interpretation by a DM to say, like, even though you succeeded on your stealth check, like, if they can see you as you're running up to make an attack, I don't care if you're 60 feet away or if you're 30 feet away, if you're 10 feet away, like, when you jump out of the bush with your weapon, coming down on them, they're not surprised anymore because they saw you. I don't know. I'm not saying that, like, that's how rules as written it works, but I think that it's allowing you to make that call.
You could do like an Altair.
The DM always has leniency with everything, as the player's handbook, the DMG, like, every book always says the DM has final say. Like, that's just the way that it is. So yeah, there's leniency. I think they try and structure it in a way that there are no questions. Everybody's on the same page with how this is supposed to work. But I mean, if it's a scenario you're just like, no, I'm sorry, like, it's the middle of the day. This guy, like, this guard hasn't been drinking. He's well aware of what's going on the job. Like,
he's been told to be on the lookout for,
Right. Then sorry, you're not going to get sneak unless you can somehow, or surprise, unless you can somehow get behind him or above him or whatever.
Right. Or shoot a ranged weapon from the bush or something.
Or throw a rock that gets him to look another way,
distract
and then jump behind him.
Honestly, the scenario that you described to me feels like the perfect use of the surprise round. If you are hiding in a bush and you've got 30 feet to travel to attack somebody, the surprise round takes effect, because or in either case, it should take effect because it means that you have a turn in which you are able to act before they notice that you are there, right? Because they failed that passive perception check. But if it would be a case-by-case basis. Like if there's no clear way, like I'm like, you're in broad daylight and there's like 10 people in front of you or between you two, like, yeah, he's going to notice you moving out of the bushes and start pushing people out of the way, Ezio style, you know, like that, like that's going to cause a little bit of commotion and he's going to see you and be able to react. One thing that it will actually, like learning these rules and kind of getting them into my head a little bit, is sometimes I would allow a free attack on a target and then go into combat, and if the player won initiative on that combat, they'd get another free attack before the other person acted. And that's exactly what the surprise phase, the surprise effect, is supposed to curtail, is being able to put everybody in initiative order at first and then just being like, oh yeah, well, this guy doesn't know that anything's going on even though he got higher initiative than you, so he's not even gonna notice.
It gives you the chance, especially if you roll really high or you have high dex, to get an attack if you make your surprise or you stay stealth, and then on the next turn get another attack before they even get to go, which is awesome.
And a potentially high dex rogue can actually go before the barbarian, who will go in, you know, yelling and screaming and throwing people.
But if they're an assassin and the target is not surprised, they're going to lose out on their automatic critical, which leads me to the next sort of phase of the conversation here. So, okay. So, right. There are obviously certain classes, character builds, and players who are really encouraged or really enjoy the sort of stealthy play style, right? The most prominent, I think, is the assassin rogue, right? Because if you make an attack while your enemy is surprised, any hits are made with advantage and they automatically crit. And it's almost like the whole reason why you make an assassin rogue, right? Is that it's like this is the whole reason.
Feature. Yeah.
So if you are one of those, if you're playing that type of character, or if you're a player who really enjoys that type of combat, right? What are some words of advice you would give to that player in order to, I guess, both tactically ensure that they are like getting surprised, but also like, what are some things that you're going to want to talk to your other party members about? What are some things you're going to want to talk to your DM about in order to make sure that you are feeling like you're playing the type of character that you want to play, and that it's working like you want it to work, right?
I think when we played our Bronze Battalion game, I think Corey did a good job of this with Turgan. His character was kind of the commander, and so it allowed him to be like, "Hey, rogue, go check this out. Like, go make sure." I guess I'm a roguey character. Go check out this, this area. Go scout ahead for us. Stay stealthy. So having a commander that can control the forces a little bit makes for an easy way that other players aren't going to just barge in there. That's I thought that was great.
Yeah, I think Colby, you kind of hit the nail on the head of what we always talk about in these episodes, is talk to your DM and talk to your party and tell them what type of build you're playing. Tell them you want to specifically play the assassin rogue because you want this guaranteed crit, and you want to be able to surprise people like that. And then your party can work around, and instead of having the barbarian get bored and rush in, the barbarian knows in character, because you've talked about it, that they should wait until they hear the screaming start before taking any action.
And hopefully they could whisper back to the barbarian and they've succeeded on that second stealth check while they're whispering the message spell.
I would say that, like, man, it's really hard to be like, what's passive perception, what's active perception, but like talking, like whispering something might actually like induce a regular perception check from the guards, in my opinion, or whoever you're trying to sneak up on. But at the same time, it's one of those things where it's like, you just got to communicate that with your party and be like, this is the character that I want to play, so give me the opportunity to play it. And your DM will make situations where you can sneak in and see the cultists about to strike and fall down on one of them with your blade drawn, kind of thing. But they will also create situations where your player is hindered in that regard, just because that's what DMs do. And it's nothing against the individual player, because we always talk about like hobbling one of your players by countering their one thing that they like to do. But it's nothing against the players. It just means that they're making room for the other players to shine in situations as well.
Right. Correct. Yeah, I think that's important. Like things to keep in mind as a player, not just, hey, communicate with your DM, communicate with your players, because that's important, obviously. But I think also, like, maybe manage your expectations as a player, right? Too. I mean, like, don't throw a fit if you don't get like a chance to stealth in and ambush the enemy on every single combat encounter, right?
That's just not realistic for
yeah.
so many scenarios. You can only sneak in, maybe a handful of times before that scenario doesn't work. I mean,
look at
it
the
just
Metal
always
Gear
depends.
Solid.
But
Metal Gear Solid, perfect example. Like you always go in with the best of intentions.
No, if you get seen, you go back to your previous save. No, you just go back to your last save.
Must have been my imagination, the guard says as he walks away after you've only moved 20 feet and then hidden again.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I think that and in the event that you do have, let's say you have talked to the other players and they are antagonistic towards your monk trying to stealth in and in other situations that would never happen in our games. But perhaps another way to help what do you want? How do I say that? To help nudge the DM, be like, hey, while they're doing this, I want to see if I can slip away from the group and go and do this thing.
And you stealth against your own party.
Yeah, and you can stealth against your own party, and then that way, when the barbarian's like, oh well, I pick on barbarians, but let's say the paladin,
it's because they're
always paladins do it all the time too. Paladins absolutely
the bard,
Russian,
whoever,
sword drawn, shouting about evil,
So yeah, like running in and saying like, oh well, I want to just defeat this thing. That gives you as the opportunity to be like, whoa, like let's take that metagaming pigeon. Somewhere,
right.
Yep. Talking about
gaming last week,
kind of keeping that at bay and being like, okay, well, he is truly off by himself. You have no knowledge of what's going on here, and kind of letting that happen.
Yeah, because I think the reality is, obviously, especially for an assassin rogue or somebody who likes this play style, they should definitely be allowed to, get that opportunity. But at the same time, you got to keep in mind, look, sometimes the enemy's going to ambush you. Sometimes you don't know a fight's going to break out until it actually breaks out. Sometimes like it can be really tedious for the other players at your table. And I say this as someone who loves playing like the stealthy, like rogue type damage dealer, right?
Yeah.
But like, I need to understand when I'm playing that type of character that like combat in D&D can already be a lengthy thing, right? And sometimes like it can be a pain to be like, okay, wait, everybody, like before we go, like I got to do my thing, and like you're always kind of being a spotlight hog, and I'm gonna sneak in and I'm gonna chase and then okay, and we're ready, and then when we hear the thing, then I'm gonna do all this awesome damage, like look at how awesome I am. And I'm not saying that like there's anything wrong with letting somebody shine, but like the fact that like sometimes other players might get a little tired of you being like, I gotta get my surprise round off every single combat, and if I don't, I'm gonna pitch a fit.
Yeah, if you force it too many times, then that's when the barbarian runs in blind.
Yeah. Or, if you want as a DM, if that is happening a lot and your player's like, hey, I really want to do this, and you don't necessarily want to punish the rogue, maybe, they're going into some crime syndicate and they had a mole on the team that actually sent them. So they already know they're coming. So when he goes to stealth and like attack this thing, it's really a paper doll. And then everyone from the, the sides start shooting at him with crossbows or whatever.
It's a trap.
Just don't do that every time.
Don't do that every time.
No,
just every so often.
That's the balance that you have to strike as a DM, right? You have to be able to give the players their time to shine, and also remind the players that it's not only their time to shine.
And that
right? There
you are God and will destroy them.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And give them an opportunity to grow, because then it's like, hey, you know, if I do the whole right hand hook thing, people are going to start to catch wind of that, and then eventually I need to start doing something else. So
uppercut. Always an uppercut.
Or it's one of those things where your party doesn't get to you quickly enough because message doesn't work, and you have to.
You're in that,
you
that
have
silence. You didn't realize it,
and you have to kind of adjust how you plan things like that.
High risk, high reward. And some people,
that's the best way to play.
The high risk, high reward, but you have to understand that sometimes, the best laid plans of rogues and men oft go awry.
Mostly. Go awry.
And be okay.
Is that the
with
title of the
happens.
episode?
No, that's too long. I can't fit that in the thumbnail. Okay. Any other sort of final thoughts about stealth, about surprise, about sort of managing your players at your table who, where this is becoming an issue or a concern that we haven't addressed already?
I'd like to actually bring up one thing, just because it's relevant to a situation that we had recently, where a couple party members were surprised and a couple party members weren't. There was definitely some discussion about, well, wouldn't we be aware of the situation going on? A little bit, not argument, but a little bit of discussion about and confusion about that needed some clarification. And I would say that as a DM, you need to clarify with your party what is going on and why they're being surprised. Because if you just tell them they're being surprised, they're going to be like, well, that's bull crap. What's going on? But if you explain to them that, oh no, they're far enough away from you that you can't actually hear this go on until this until this trigger word is, our latest episode of Tales of Veneria is what I'm specifically talking about here. Is nobody knew that combat was happening until the bandit captain shouted that you guys were hostile. And that they needed to attack, and that kind of triggered everybody into action here. And it's one of those things where I was like, I had to fend off a couple of you at the same time, being like, wait, can't we hear this? Can we see this? Like,
I had the high initiative,
okay.
But I didn't know what was happening, so I didn't get to go.
Yep,
and that's okay. That happens.
I want to actually give a personal apology, Colby, to you as I grow and learn as a DM. I don't use passive perceptions nearly as much as I did back, or I didn't use them as much as I do these days, and that made your life as a monk assassin combo for your first character a lot harder, because you had people actively looking for you all the time when they shouldn't have been.
Sure, I appreciate that. Although I think everyone on in this conversation knows that Reese was really mostly to blame for not getting my surprise round off.
I'll take some of that blame as well, because there was a lot of chances where I was just like, you know what, Colby's being a butt today, so I'm gonna go in. So.
What? Me?
I'll let them take all the blame. I never did anything.
I don't think Reese watches these shows, but Reese, if you are,
we love you.
You know that we love you, and I loved our characters' sort of antagonistic relationship in that game. But yeah, definitely there was a lot.
We got another card: character conflict versus player conflict.
There you go. For help resolving your conflict between players and characters. Anyway, okay. Anybody else have anything else to add before we
make the rogues? Don't do it because you're scared you're not going to get your surprise round. Just do it. Make a rogue.
Rogues are fun.
They are. I want to play a rogue.
Maybe I'll play a rogue, and then I remembered that I'm playing a rogue right
now.
You
are playing a rogue. And it's just such a different rogue.
Preston, no, well, and it is, but Preston also plays him like a bard, because that's all he knows how to do.
Yeah.
But I remember we got into one of these combats that you had stealthed away from, and Helen was like, "Oh, you're doing rogue stuff! Oh my gosh, it's so amazing!" Like, it doesn't happen very often, but make a rogue; it will happen eventually.
Yes, there are few things more gratifying than like getting into position and executing a perfect assassination on like a high profile target, like a caster or something.
People in the comments, take that out of context, please, so that we have a clip
in Dungeons and Dragons.
in Dungeons and Dragons. Underlined. Colby's now on the do not fly list.
Yeah, I'm gonna get demonetized now. YouTube's gonna be like, this guy's like an assassin for hire.
Assassins, weird.
Yeah, awesome. No, because I haven't had a lot of them, but there was one, there have been moments in game where, like you get in position, you're behind the curtain, right? And like before anything even happens, you just like, one shot, somebody, and then the fight breaks out and you're just like, that was so cool.
I would say as a player, never expect to be able to ambush a final boss or even any sort of like boss monster. Yeah. I know it
especially
sucks
with layer actions. Don't even.
But
don't even
it is one of those things. Yeah, it's one of those things where your dungeon master like has set up this big epic encounter, and you critting and taking out the big bad in the first round would be absolutely awful. So I'm sorry, they're probably going to,
or they're gonna just have like
let
double
it happen.
Hit points.
Let it happen, and then have the big bad turn around and just pick up that guy by his face and move him aside and drop him and be like, nice try.
Yeah, give him a little bit of the Strahd treatment. Yeah.
All right. Well,
it's been a pleasure.
Thank you for watching, everybody. Love you guys. Let us know, of course, in the comments, if you guys have any ways that you would interpret the rulings a little bit differently, whether at your table or you think we're off on our rules as written interpretations. And, great stories. I'd love to hear your best stories about your stealthy character that pulled off some amazing feat. Or your favorite tactic as a Leroy Jenkins type character to go in and spoil the rogue's assassination attempts every single time. Thank you to all of you guys for joining me as always.
Anytime.
And stay tuned for the next episode. Check out the other stuff that's available on the channel. Like, subscribe, and join, and do all of the things that we always ask you to do. And have a fantastic day. I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
See you guys.